Hello, hey everybody! Welcome to Away Games, the Chicago Cubs podcast. It's supersized in the new year. I can't remember if this is our first of the new year or not, but I also don't care. It feels new because we got new people here. First of all, here is an old person, a man who's here all the time. It's Adam Amwala. How are you, Adam?
Hello, it's me, an old person.
Yes, it's the youngest person on the pod, but old, tied for oldest in terms of seniority, I suppose.
It's true. And who else do we have here, Kevin?
Well, we have Ken Schultz. Look, it's Ken Schultz.
New year, new me, new pod, same old shit with the Ricketts.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. New year.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, before you got on, Ken, Kevin and I were discussing how it's nice to record this early in the morning as we do this about 10 Eastern, 9 Central, because it's the only time of day where Kevin and I can get close to matching your baritone. It only lasts for like an hour or two, but we want to do it when we're all sounding extra sexy. So,
gosh, yeah, it's I mean, it is a superpower at this point. That if you want to join in the whole throwback to the old Barry White Budweiser commercial, testing for your love.
I was realizing as Adam commented, he's like, geez, you sound like this, and I was like, yeah, these are the first words I've spoken today. I realized I had waved at my wife but not said anything.
I'm honored.
Yeah, this is it. This is how we begin. We begin at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram and all the things. And I guess we're going to talk about the new Cub that was just named, and then Ken visited the Cubs convention. So we're going to talk about that. I'm genuinely interested and excited about that, and I think there's going to be there's at least going to be positive things in that, which is cool. And I'm glad to bring that we're going to have a little bit of a positive vibe on this show. First, the Trey Mancini signed. He's going to play in his 31-year-old season, 2 years, $14 million. How are you guys feeling about that?
I feel
a positive vibe too, honestly.
Fine. Yeah, I like Mancini a lot as a dude. I think his story is really cool. I also and we talked about this a little bit, Kevin, on a previous pod, in the way that like Lester and Rizzo bonded over their shared experience of having beaten cancer and come back from that. Like now we have Mancini and Jameson Taillon who have had that similar experience. And I've never heard anything bad about Mancini in his career. He seems like a really good dude. I know the like Cubs prospect Twitter is very distraught about like, what does this mean for Mervis, or is he going to be blocked now? If he's that good, he's not going to be blocked. So my opinion is like, I think it's good to have someone else in the mix at first base, at DH. And I mean, 2 for 14 seems fine to me.
Yeah, if you're that upset about Matt Mervis, just consider the fact that his baseline in order to get major league playing time has to be, are you better than Eric Hosmer? Which,
right.
At this point, the other two people on this call might be able to start at first base for the Cubs.
You should. Yeah, that's a good point, because Mervis is the left-handed hitter in what you'd assume is some sort of platoonish thing we have going on at first base with Hosmer, Mancini, who Mancini was great in 2019, obviously had cancer after that. Then in 2021 was the comeback player of the year. First half of last year was good. Second half was pretty bad. So it's who knows exactly what we're getting here, but it's a little bit of power. He's a right-handed hitter who plays first in both corner outfield spots. But like you say, Ken, the Cubs also signed Eric Hosmer. They're paying him the league minimum, which is their favorite. And he used to be a guy. He had a couple of good offensive seasons, but he was a guy who, even when he signed that deal with the Padres, it seemed nuts. And he's only gotten worse since then. It was interesting to me that Sahadev, who's pretty even-handed and stuff, Sahadev broke down how by any metric Eric Hosmer is the worst defensive first baseman over the last few years. So it's like, wow, I knew he was overrated. He's a 4-time Gold Glover, and I knew it didn't like really match, the rep didn't match the results really defensively, but I didn't realize it was that. So yeah, Matt Mervis has to be better than that.
Why would that have been? I mean, was he like a Jim Edmonds at first base? Like he made flashy plays, but he wasn't as good as other people who should have gotten more credit? Is that how it worked?
He kept diving over his shoulder, and that's just not the way to play first base. And he just really was Jim Edmondsing all the time over there.
He was doing it on pop-ups just to look cool.
Grab ball to first, and Eric Hosmer dives for it. Yeah,
it just takes the body takes a beating too.
I think part of it is that
Go ahead.
the metrics have changed since the mid 2010s. So
Right.
that's kind of a reevaluation of his overall defensive game. And also in his prime, he was on that brief spasm of great Royals teams, which
Right.
the entire team was set up to be great defensively. So if I think just through sheer momentum, the voters of the Gold Glove kind of decided that, okay, well, they've got Lorenzo Cain, they've got Mike Moustakas, Eric Hosmer must be great too.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
And
it's like you're good by association.
Yeah,
especially at first
which
base.
is why I'm on this podcast.
Hey. No, I mean, you were bringing up, trust me, you're bringing up the raising the floor of this podcast for sure, which, God, I've heard enough of that phrase. I tweeted that too, but just every Cubs signing that they've made, and even the good ones this season, we hear a lot of hemming and hawing, and then people are like, well, it raises the floor. I'd like a ceiling. I would okay. So, I mean, truly the difference between winning 78 games and winning 68 games doesn't change my vibes that much. I would like to peak that ceiling a little bit, but Mancini does raise the floor. So
I will say the only concern that I have with Mancini is, as you know, I'm all about the T-shirt ideas, and
Sure.
we know no one loves anything more than a platoon-based T-shirt idea, and I don't want Mancini. I don't want Mancini to. I'm really setting this up. I don't want Mancini to impact the Haas Mervis shirts that were going to be all the rage this year, and that does concern me.
Man, I don't know if literally merch has ever been developed for a platoon at a position where it's like, I mean, like you could say, I'm sure there's been like a battery mate, maybe like a pitcher and catcher combined, but two guys whose very existence on the active roster for that day negates the existence of the other one on one T-shirt would be truly incredible.
Also, I feel like Haas Mervis sounds like some sort of anxiety medication.
Yeah, you
Absolutely
ask your
does,
doctor
yes.
about Haas Mervis, and your doctor's going to be like, I don't know, I would have gone for something bigger, but it's fine. Yeah.
I would have gone for Abreu, but
Yeah. Yeah.
The 22 Cubs, the 2022 Cubs give me massive Haas Mervis.
Yes, absolutely.
I
sure do.
didn't stutter it, but what are you going to do?
We're, as we said, it's early in the morning. It's early in the season. It's preseason. But the best year, if you want to dream on it, I'm looking at Mancini's numbers, and his best year in 2019 hit 291, 35 homers, 97 RBIs. Granted, in Baltimore, with the apparently the fences are being pushed further. This was, but still 899 OPS. That was his peak season. So you know what it reminds me of a little bit. If we're being optimistic about it, a little Eric Karros, Randall Simon at first base vibes in terms of a platoony sort of like veteran older contract. I mean, not the Mervis part, as we hope offers more ceiling, but yeah, maybe a little bit of that.
Yeah, when you bring in like veterans players like that to platoon, that's kind of the goal, is to kind of catch that year where maybe both of them have that like kind of last spasm of greatness. And I've used the word spasm twice in this podcast already.
Well, that is one of the side effects of Haas Mervis, so that makes
sense. It's effective, but there's spasms.
Yeah, but I mean, every now and again, like you make that bet and it pays off. And sometimes you make that bet and it pays off in everybody, and you get to be like the 2013 Red Sox. So it's worth a shot.
Totally. And that, I mean, then a good comp for what your best friend Jed wants to do, I guess, and he did specifically reference that those Red Sox teams, I guess, this at the convention this week. Any other spare Mancini thoughts before we get to Ken's?
I don't, but your mention of the name Eric Karros just spurred like a sense memory in my mind. Am I correct in remembering that he was the person who hit a home run off of Clemens when Clemens was trying to get his 300th win in that game when Hee-Seop Choi got hurt?
Yep, nailed it.
Wow, pretty proud of myself.
Yeah, that is pretty good. I know the main thing I remembered about Eric Karros is it's a very elder millennial thing, but I remember him like running around with like a handheld camcorder, like filming everything before phones. Yeah. He was the guy who was he was sort of the documentarian of that club.
Right. And they spent years afterwards asking him, hey, do you want to make those public at some point? Do you want to like edit them together? And he was always like, nah, I'm not sure you want to see what's on there.
Right.
Yeah, locker room
That's
stuff.
fair. Yeah.
Given that was a clubhouse with like Sammy and Moises, I don't blame him. So
Sure.
You know what? Maybe he has proof of the boombox incident.
ooh.
Oh, that's true. Oh, friggin' Zapruder style. Julio Zuleta Pruder. I don't know. I was trying to get as close as I could. Yeah, man, with Moises and Sammy back there, even if nothing was illegal, the grade, like a restaurant gets an A, B, or C, that locker room, where they're going to get, the Department of Health is going to come down on it.
Well, when the chefs are peeing on their hands, you're only going to get such a good grade, you know?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it was a different kind of spread back then.
It's a different kind of people requesting to see it. But,
yeah, that's true. I mean,
point.
friggin' get it on a real OnlyFans it up, and maybe we can fund one more minimum salary to round out this roster.
2003 Cubs, no kink shaming.
No kink shaming. Yes, we could all get on board on that. And Ken, I was so happy to see that you went to the convention this year, because I think we've all shared similar vibes about like the direction of the team over the past couple years and things like that. So I wasn't sure if I was in Chicago if I would have it in me, but I was glad to see that you did go enjoy some Cub and baseball time. So tell us about how that was.
Yeah, I went kind of because last year was just such a 162 game bummer of a vibe, and I kind of thought that I don't want to do that again this year. Like, if possible, like the ownership and Jed are going to piss me off regardless, but let's see if I can kind of make a mental separation between my hatred for the executive side and see if I can still kind of embrace the actual players and the actual team.
Right. You want to support the troops, but not the military. I understand.
Yeah, not the Cubs industrial complex, but yes, it would honestly, it would be nice if we did invade some more teams for players and stuff. Yeah. But but we would, but the individuals, I think that's a great point, and that's something that hopefully doesn't get lost in what we've talked about as we analyze the on-field product and the choices that are being made. Is that we always root for the Cubs and the players that are here. I mean, truly looking across the roster right now, I don't have beef with any of these individual guys. I'm rooting for all of them as far as I can, as far maybe I'm missing someone, but we root for these Cubs and the guys wearing those shirts.
Yeah. And so I kind of thought, well, been to the Cubs convention a few times before, and it seems like that might be kind of a nice little shock to the system to kind of get me back into that mindset of just being around like the most positive section of the fan base for the most part, that just kind of wants to be there and be like, it's January, we want to think about baseball and you make us happy. So and it worked for the most part. Like it really was like a couple days of just remembering that, yeah, these guys are fun, they do a cool thing, and I'm into it. And even the parts that involved, the people that I loathe directly, between the Ricketts session and the Jed Carter session, that was just a couple of hours of the morning having to deal with that. And even one of them, like the Ricketts, ended with Ryno Sandberg getting a statue, which is the best possible ending in my world. So
you're number one of all time. And that it seemed like, so first you went to multiple days of the convention.
Yeah. Friday night and Saturday went the whole day with our friend of the pod, Sarah Sanchez. And Sunday they just turned into a kids only kind of clinic thing, and I'm neither a kid nor should be playing baseball, as Adam can verify after having tried to play catch with me at Wrigley.
Well, I was gonna say, is it true? I heard a rumor that the Sandberg statue is actually going to be a statue of you impersonating Ryno Sandberg at Wrigley with that little twirl at second base.
He's the stand-in, yeah.
The other thing that I would imagine is cool, and you've been to the convention, right, Kevin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went. The time I went, it was the first thing I think of is the Chris Bryant saying St. Louis is boring year. Okay. So got to watch that, and
2019, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I've never been, but I think the other thing that would be cool about it is that we are, all three of us, by our own admission, like fairly intense Cubs fans, in a way that even when you're at Wrigley, not everyone there is as intense as you. And I would think that going to the convention, you're just surrounded by people who also care about the Cubs as much as you, and that's inherently kind of a cool experience.
Yeah, like I mean, there's been times at Wrigley where like Sarah and I, in the middle of a game, have been lectured by a person in front of us to stop talking so much about baseball. So that does not happen at the convention, thankfully.
Right.
Yeah, everybody's that's the baseline, is assuming you want to talk 24/7 baseball. So yeah, like just kind of to harken back to our convention experience together in 2019, like one of the differences that I noticed right away is that it started in 2019 with a Tom Ricketts like 15-minute dig me speech, which is like, if you're going to get people off on the right foot, why not throw out the most loathsome part of your organization? And so this year it started with Cole Wright coming out and trying to do like a hype man bit, and Cole is great at that. So already, like, that's an improvement. And
as an upbeat broadcaster, right? Like he's
right. He's there to kind of talk up everybody in the current team, and you figure like that's probably the best use of somebody like that for a live event like that. And so about 5 minutes into that, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe we're not going to see Ricketts at all. And that's when I texted you guys, hey, no Ricketts dig me speech this year. And like 30 seconds after that, segued into, ladies and gentlemen, the chairman of the board of the Chicago Cubs, Mr. Tom Ricketts. And it was fascinating to watch him take the stage, because I'm certain that he thought that after an offseason where they spent money on Dansby and made other signings, that would mean that everything was cool from that point forward. And as he kind of got on stage, like, you heard a definite boo from certain parts of the crowd. Like, it wasn't the whole crowd, like when he mentioned Marquee a few years ago, but it was there, like, noticeably. And like, I wasn't certain in terms of texting you guys. I was at first going to be like, oh, Tom Ricketts takes the stage to a mixed response. And then I listened for 10 seconds, like, nope, he's getting booed. Like, that's legit. You can't play that off.
Yeah, I'm going to assume you were part of the booing, right?
I was there just to observe at that point.
Yeah,
I was.
It's a thing where, like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ken.
I'm kind of on board with like you guys in the sense that I'm not into booing my own guys, and oddly enough, that kind of transcends to ownership too, at least at this point, unless they said something like purely Republican or homophobic, then I'd be all over them. Right. But
that's kind of redundant, Ken. But
they save that for a lot of their side projects that get a lot of money. But yeah, I think I'm similar, where I think this sounds stupid and simplistic, but just making a boo noise, to me, the way my brain works, I can't get there. It feels silly. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm an adult making this noise that is not a word that we've agreed on. I can't get myself there. So I don't boo. And also, I would never boo a player.
Do you hiss? Are you open to the hiss?
I don't hiss. I don't. I've hissed less than I've booed, I believe, in my life. So the booing's pretty low. But I do. It is weird that, like, I also don't think I would have booed Ricketts, but I would have. The people who did boo, I'm happy with, in this case, where I think this is a case, because booing your players, typically the teams that do that are, it's like, if we've all been to Yankee games, they love to do it. Booing players that fail on the field, and that to me is never booable, because this is just effort. As long as the effort's there, as long as you fail, that's part of the thing, and that's when your team needs the most support from a human standpoint. You're not helping them by booing. Now, ownership and management, you're booing choices they've made or the things they do. So I do think that's definitely more excusable, especially in this case. And I felt happy to see that and to hear from you that was a little bit there, even if it was like 70-30 or something, because I think I would have just been apathetic, not clapping, right? But also valid. But
that's where I was. And I was also kind of just savoring the schadenfreude of it all too.
Right.
That was just kind of nice to see somebody who wasn't expecting to get a comeuppance get his richly deserved ending.
Yeah.
And he started into like whatever he prepared for that year's hype speech, but it was clear 30 seconds in, the crowd was not having it. And at some point, someone should tell him, you can't work a crowd. You shouldn't try to work a crowd if they're against you like that. Because the best he could do after about a minute of like booze and
like unrest, kind of, was
just shh.
Oh God!
Like actual shushing the crowd. That was there to cheer everybody up.
Never
like, be cool, be cool, be cool. And I'm watching there. I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm flashing back to like my first year of guest spots after open micing for about a year at like the old Barrel of Laughs in Oak Lawn on a night where I was just eating it hard on stage. I remember a moment where like people in the crowd were turning to each other up front and going, "This guy sucks." And the only thing my brain at 1 year in could think of to say is, "No, I don't."
even that is better than a shush, because "no, I don't" is a counter argument. It's not like I don't know. It's not like paternalistic in the same way that like shushing a group of people who've paid money to you to come to your thing. And it's, I mean, it's not surprising to see this sort of disconnect on a human level that any team owner, billionaire Ricketts has. But it is satisfying to see you can never be so rich that you can buy charisma, or that you can, like,
CC Elon Musk.
Seriously, you cannot purchase the ability to be funny or likable or any of these things. And it sucks because like Ricketts could be beloved. It's not hard, but it will never be because he's funny or interesting or anything. You just gotta spend the fucking money. Like that's it. And even if they are spending money now, that doesn't absolve you of the period of time in which you didn't. So it's like, yeah, they're spending now. Good, but there's still valid reasons to be. So
it's a great point. Like Steve, I don't know that I've ever heard Steve Cohen talk. I've only seen him tweet, but he could be the least charismatic person in the world. And if there were some sort of Mets convention, I guarantee you he's getting a very, very warm round of applause. And I have no doubt
this year,
at the 2017 Cubs convention, they were getting all of the adulation that they frankly deserved at that time. But that doesn't just keep going forever without you having to do anything to keep backing it up.
Yeah. And I think that's what they counted on, was that after 2016, that they were the ones that owned the team when they won the World Series. So that's a lifetime of get out of jail free cards, essentially, which is a very apt metaphor for what the Ricketts do in the other.
It is. And it does get you the benefit of the doubt year after year. It gets you all the tiebreakers. And I think the thing is they've just they've chosen enough times in a row, Bale is selling off you Darvish at the after winning a division, not ponying up the money to retain one position player from the core that won that, who very smart and more successful recently teams are finding value in, all that. And even down to this is a whole other topic, but like firing scouts to save yourself pennies as you go into the biggest sell-off year when you would need scouts the most. Like these, all these things count, and along the way, and that's how you lose yourself the benefit of the doubt. So that's in it. Do you remember, were there like bullet points of his main selling points in the hype speech at the top?
He pivoted so quickly that that part of it completely just escaped my mind. It's just, what I remember is him trying to start a speech that sounded a lot like what he did when we went last time in 2019. And then once it was clear the crowd wasn't having it, he tried to do that terrible bit of crowd work, shushing them. And then immediately when it was clear that also wasn't going to work, he brought up Pat Hughes. And that's kind of what he did the entire weekend, is that every time it went to an uncomfortable area where it was clear that people were making their honest feelings about him felt, like he immediately tried to go pivot to, here's somebody that you like, and here's cool. So this will get.
He just runs out of that. He's like, I know you guys don't like me, but let's hear it for pizza, guys. How about pizza?
You guys like pizza? And there was a lot of pizza there this weekend.
I'm sure there was.
Pat Hughes is the equivalent of "give it up for the troops," unfortunately.
Hughes and like you said, the Ryne Sandberg announcement, which did it seem like that was a surprise to Sandberg?
Yes, it because he explained shortly afterwards, they had him on a marquee interview on TV that was played for everybody after the session was over. He mentioned that I guess the Cubs higher ups had told his family the night before that this was going to happen, but they told him not to tell Ryno. They only told him, just, could you sit in the audience for the Ricketts session? And they didn't go any further. So he assumed that he was going to like answer a question or something. When he explained it. And then,
what a juxtaposition between like a request and the result, where it's like, hey, can you watch the owners? Hey, retired legend, can you watch the owners Q&A? Like, what did I do? Why are you punishing me like this? And then to get a reward at the end.
Yeah, it was like, I'm sure it had to be in the back of his mind, because he said, as he said too, that over the past several years, people have been asking him about getting a statue, and like the Cubs put an empty pedestal up in Statue Row when they unveiled Fergie last year. So it was clear that there's others coming soon, and you'd figure like logically he's next. But until they actually make the announcements, you know, you don't know that it's going to be you. And I'm sure it's still like, oh my God, it's actually happening now. That's a cool thing. But like the way that worked on Saturday was kind of similar thing, where people were asking about Sosa, understandably, because when he brought out Grace and Dunston on Friday night to introduce them as Hall of Famers, people were also chanting Sammy, 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 and he had to do some awkward, terrible crowd work around that too before bringing them out. So during the session on Saturday morning, like a couple of the questions, and one questioner like pointedly told him, I am not here for you. I am here because of the players, and chiefly because Sammy Sosa was my favorite as a kid. So a lot of what you guys have been saying on the pod was kind of directly said to his face. And Ricketts kind of would do kind of hemming and hawing with that, where he'd talk about like, oh, there's two sides to the story. And for some reason decided to segue into, well, you look at his Hall of Fame voting, you can see clearly there's two sides to that. And you wanted to be like, you own the Chicago Cubs. Like, no one is asking the Baseball Writers Association of America to decide whether or not you invite like a legit team legend back for a Cub convention. That's not a thing.
No, and I'm pretty sure Dunston didn't make the Hall of Fame, and neither did Mark Grace. So this is, I mean, it's obviously a bullshit argument, and it's him both sidesing a thing when he's the only side, kind of, is crazy, you know. And it's such a cop out too. It's such a cop out that he, and this is not surprising, but just to be the owner of the team who wants all the adulation of things, but then when is confronted on something like this, is like, I don't know, it's out of my hands, and I hope for the best. And I know he said there's been like no development with Sammy, and I hope it comes to a resolution. And it's just like, there's no hope. Who are you hoping to? This is you. This is your choice, and I just don't know why, from a selfish perspective, why he wouldn't just get the fuck out of the way at this point. He can't possibly have these strong morals about anything. I mean, that can't be it. So it's just get out of the way. Let Sammy show up looking crazy and get cheered once, and it'll be great. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if nothing else too, and I'm remembering back to like a Cubs convention from 2003, like whenever they decide to relent and bring him back, like the unintentional comedy from the Sammy Sosa session is going to be amazing.
Oh my God, because yes.
The last time he was there, like they did a full like hour with just him and Dave Kaplan, and it essentially just boiled down to Kaplan asking, hey, Sammy, what's it like to be awesome? And Sammy would give answers like, well, I got to tell you, Dave, honestly, it's great. So,
that sounds amazing. Just to be like, tell you what rules is being famous, and being rich ain't bad either. And it's a good time being Sammy Sosa. It's just pure upside. So hopefully that gets settled too.
Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned Pat Hughes before. I assume he spoke in some capacity and did like a signing and stuff. But my friend Amy, who hooked us up with the Wrigley tour, I don't know if you got a chance to connect with her. I guess she was there for like a day or two. Also, it speaks to what you said earlier about last year, where like arguably your best day at Wrigley last year was the day that the Cubs were not at Wrigley. But anyway. She, I think we played it on the podcast that you and I had gotten her a cameo from Pat Hughes that was very meaningful to her, and she in turn sent me a photo this past weekend of like, hey, I've got something for you, and she had gotten a Pat Hughes bobblehead like made out to Adam, signed by Pat Hughes, so that will be coming my way at some point. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah,
it was very sweet.
I didn't run into Amy, unfortunately, but yeah, that's just great.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I love the idea of just like giving each other Pat Hughes gifts.
Absolutely. I would have loved for Pat Hughes to have commentated like Sandberg getting the statue. Like, Sandberg with the blue suit with the white accent. And...
the Hall of Fame crest on the jacket pocket. Absolutely, yeah.
Pat Hughes related gifts. It's fun. I have a group text chain going with some friends of mine who are mostly like who work in the TV industry one way or another, who are mostly Mets fans. But began with I got one of them a 40th birthday present that was just a Keith Hernandez cameo, and now when any life event happens for any dude in the chat, they send a Keith Hernandez cameo about it. So Keith Hernandez just keeps talking to this group about different things. But yeah.
I have to ask, was it filmed live on Tucker Carlson?
It was not, and literally a group in the chat, it was R.I.P. Keith Meets. Keith's Meets became the name of the chat, and after the Tucker thing, we're like, well, it was fun while it lasted. So that's it. See ya, dude.
Yeah, 80s ball player gonna 80s ball player.
Exactly.
That is true.
So tell us about obviously you saw the ownership panel. What were the notable current player things that you took away from this week, moments that you saw?
Yeah, and follow up, who looked hottest in person?
Nico Horner, no question.
Oh, there you go.
Scruffy Nico makes me feel feelings. Yeah. Oh boy. That's like in and of itself. It was, if the only player interaction was just that, it would have been the perfect weekend. So the best player interview to watch was the Ian Happ Compound podcast live recording.
Oh, cool.
It was really interesting because watching Ian Happ like host a show like that live, you see just how skilled he is at like kind of combining ball player to ball player talk. So it's clear that like these guys are giving you like a little insider view, but not making it esoteric, like kind of making it open and available to the public. Right. So it's like, you're not diving too deep into their world where it's just like only talk stuff they care about, stuff that they care about.
Right.
But you also feel like, oh my God, I'm learning a whole lot about the way like players actually view playing in this park and playing in the modern era. Example of that, he at the end of their segment had brought out Cody Bellinger and Mark Grace for the final interview of the recording, and kind of started talking to them as like, so guys, as three left-handed hitters hitting at Wrigley Field, what do you think that experience is like? And it was kind of clear that as they kind of started discussing it, left-handers, even when the wind is blowing out, don't really like Wrigley at all. That's because they talked about how the first couple months of the year, as we all know, it blows in for the most part. So you get everything knocked down. And even when it shifts during the summer, they said that a lot of the winds tend to blow from right to left. So that if you're going to try to pull the ball to right field, you're still running against some kind of obstacle to kind of get it in the bleachers. You have to learn mostly to go to left center if you want to have any power as a lefty in Wrigley, which the first time I'd ever heard that at all, and to hear it from three guys.
That is an interesting thing that
I mean, who's hit the most lefty home runs at Wrigley in history?
So Happ brought up that the only left-hander who's ever had a 40 home run season as a Cub is Billy Williams. So I would assume that's got to be the answer.
Yeah, I off the top of my head, it's like Billy Williams, Henry Rodriguez probably got close, at some point. And then, as we know, Rizzo got to 32 a number of times. But, like he loves that 32. But probably, I guess power-wise, and I mean, Ian Happ, honestly, setting as a switch hitter, I would have to see what the breakdown is of righty-lefty. I think he hit most of his homers lefty in that, like, rookie, didn't he briefly have like the rookie switch hitting home run record? I think it was, which is a lot of modifiers.
He had like 24, 25 that year.
Yeah, he came up in that juice ball season in 2017, and people didn't think he was going to have power, but then started leaving the park on a fairly regular basis and surprised everyone with the capability of it.
But even as you say that, a lot of those are like, you think of Ian Happ left-handed homers, a lot of those are like center left too, it's he's at a good amount that way. But Ian Happ first stood out to me as a personality, like I think it was after that rookie year at the convention in 20, I guess it would have been 2019, but just being like, this guy's more like interesting and like funny and than I thought. Than I was
more than you'd think, because it's almost like become a running joke on the compound that he just like looks very serious a lot of the time. So I think when you just see him as a ball player, you're like, oh, I guess he's just kind of dull and doesn't have a lot of opinions. But I've actually kept up with the compound. I think I've listened to almost every episode, and I don't know if it was his intention at the time. I think they were just bored during COVID, but he's very much setting himself up for a post-playing career already, because it would be hard to not picture him as some sort of analyst or broadcaster or something whenever he's done, which hopefully isn't for 10 years, but like he's good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And as I say, like he's very good at setting his fellow players up to kind of give you information that you weren't aware of before, which is hard for like professional broadcasters to do, let alone a on-field player. And he's also like in front of a large crowd at Cub Convention. Like he's really good at just kind of being laid back, not trying to do too much as a host. And yeah, he's got a real good public persona, and it really comes across very well in a session like that. So
Yeah.
that was far and away like my favorite of the whole weekend. Also, oddly enough, and this kind of will get me kicked off of Cubs Twitter at some point. Ryan Dempster still pretty good at hosting a 2-hour show on Friday night.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. Like Ryan Dempster, when I saw him at that show, like he did a nice job, and like you said about Ian Happ, he wasn't the kind of guy who just kept talking on his own. Like he likes having fun with people, I think. And I think Ryan Dempster is underrated as an analyst at this point, because I think people just got worked up about him doing Harry Carey impressions and stuff like that. But you watch the games when he's making the call, and he has a lot of interesting stuff to say. And yeah, I didn't see any of his late night talk show this year, but glad to see. Who were the guests that he had on during that?
They had Dansby Swanson on. It was kind of cool that when they had Dansby on, they played a video in the back of his wife, Mallory Pugh, playing for the Chicago Red Stars, and kind of got a big pop from the crowd. Like everybody got a huge applause out of that. Which,
that's fun.
Seeing women's soccer getting applause at Cubs Convention, like if you went back to like 1993 and bet people that would happen, you would win a
right.
shit ton of money. So
totally.
Yeah, that was cool. He had Ian and Nico on at the end. They were about to play like a wine pong game at the end when we kind of bailed on the night. But yeah,
that does seem like, in general, that's evergreen. When wine pong begins, that's a good time to bail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I guess a classier Napa version of beer pong.
I was gonna say it's real moneyed up college. That makes sense. Nico's in the mix there. That feels Stanfordy,
Very Stanfordy, yes. They're very wearing an ascot and talking like future tech bros and business shakers of the world.
Yeah, a lot of turtlenecks, by the way, this week.
Yes, yeah. I don't know if I'm sure that's probably a player thing that they decided amongst themselves, but yeah, guys can rock the turtleneck. Mm-hmm. Christopher Morel was wearing like distressed cutout jeans during his session, which was a very, very Christopher Morel look. And he gets like a massive pop from the crowd. Like everybody is on board with what he's doing. I think pretty much all you have to do is show the highlight of the first at bat home run from last year, and people go a bit nuts. And he was part of the kids press conference where kids like one adorable moppet after another asked little quick questions. And someone asked him, Morel, why do you smile so good? And he speaks decent English, but still needs like Adbert to translate a lot of things. So it takes like a second for Adbert to translate the question, and then he just looks at him and goes, God is good.
Oh, that's very nice.
He is. It's nice to have
kind of the perfect. Yeah, that's adorbs.
Yeah, it's nice to have a guy in the mix who's standing out as sort of like a fan fave personality. I mean, I think that's one thing that I think we've obviously, you can go down the list and lost so much of, even if there's, you can see like, oh, this guy's a good player that was brought in, this guy's a good player. There's just been so much like heart and like emotion of this team that has left. It's nice to see Christopher Morel as a guy who knows how much he's going to be starting or whatever, but is a guy that's just actively fun, does fun things, and you can like feel the emotion and expression coming from the guy.
Filling a little bit of the Javi void personality-wise, which is nice.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good comp. And it feels like the crowd is responding to him in kind of a Javi way, of that we just like everything you do and kind of the energy you bring to everything. It's a very similar kind of connection to that. So yeah, I like that a lot. The other kind of connection I noticed too is it feels like people are really showing Kyle Hendricks some genuine appreciation for what he's meant to the franchise. I think JD during the pitcher session brought up that, you are the last of 2016 at this point, and people give applause to that. So Hendricks, I think, has kind of taken on a little bit of that mantle too, of like, I'm the last guy around from the transcendent team that everybody loves. And he's also, it's interesting to watch because he's really kind of embraced his image of like being this awkward guy who cannot be cool no matter how much effort he puts into it, but is still going to enjoy it regardless. What comes across is that someone who's just really kind of comfortable as himself at this point. And it's almost effortless to kind of watch him get interviewed now. And it's really cool to see that he's not putting on big league airs because he just can't. And he understands that, and he's fine with it. And it comes across as someone who's just out there having a good time and is really friendly and relatable.
That's really nice to hear, because he's been such a great part of this organization for obviously like longer than everybody now, you know, as the last of that roster that's still here. And I think he can be it, like, sometimes when you're trying to, you know, if you're like me and sometimes sitting there with insomnia and writing the lineup and the rotation in your notes app and just being like, what's this year going to look like? It's easy to sort of forget about Hendricks as everyone comes in, and he was injured for so much of last year. And, you know, you always end up throwing Hendricks in at the end of that rotation. But this is a guy who, I mean, was a genuine number one for so long. And it's cool to see the crowd not. It's cool to hear from you that the crowd is still appreciating him as the pitcher he is and the Cub he is.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, we know we got to let you go here soon. Any parting thoughts or anything you want to plug before we get on our way?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me a couple times every week on Outsports. I just published a story about the Kalamazoo Wings clapping back at a homophobe in their mentions when they put out a Pride avatar. That was pretty great to see. So, yeah, outsports.com. My Instagram is @KenThinGuy. I am occasionally jumping onto Twitter at Ken Schultz _, but yeah, most of the time, Insta and Outsports are where you find me now.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for doing it, Ken. Go find Ken everywhere. One of our favorite writers, one of the best writers who writes about baseball and sports in the biz, and obviously great on the podcast as well. Follow also our friend Sarah Sanchez that got a shout out from Bleed Cubby Blue, who joins Ken at on some of these jaunts around Cubtown. And yeah, it's nice to be a little excited about this season coming up. So thanks for joining us, Ken. We're at Away Games Pod everywhere, and we'll catch you soon, I guess.